Fans of the Weigh-In podcast, welcome to this week's Takedown Thursdays presented by the Weigh-In podcast by Sebastian Romero and Benoit Chestnut. So on this week's Weigh-In, we're going to talk about one of our topics is the coaching change in Division I NCAA wrestling. You've got Donnie, former coach of Rutgers, is now over at Columbia, and you've also got Anthony Ashnall over at Princeton. You probably already know that as we are in the midst of wrestling season, and our big topic for today that we're going to go over is the big title of today, the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Do you think they pose a threat to Cael Sanderson getting another team title? And let's break it down for you. At 125, they got Troy Spratley. I've seen Troy Spratley wrestle by watching, online TV, and Troy Spratley is a guy where I see that he's got solid technique and solid wrestling enough that I think he's going to place. I think he's going to All-American at NCAAs. And I think the key to success here for the Oklahoma State Cowboys is to get most of your wrestlers through that up to the quarters. You can get most of your wrestlers to the quarters and about half of wrestlers into the semis. You're looking good. Really, the goal would be to get all your wrestlers up to the semis and all your wrestlers to be able to All-American at the NCAA tournament because, for them, I think this is the great chance to take down Cael Sanderson with this good group. At 133, they've got Cale Hughes. I've seen him wrestle. I think he's got more than solid technique, and I think for Cale Hughes, it's that time that he's able to score certain points and get back-to-back takedowns, and I think that's the key to success here at this Division I level. If you can go up 2 takedowns on a guy, that's going to make the difference. Whether you let him up is another story to be said, but you got to get 2 quick takedowns. Like you get 2 takedowns, even a takedown late in a first period or late second period is always good to know, is to get those 2 takedowns because you put yourself at a distance away from your opponent, and you always want to make sure you're up. You always want to make sure every minute of the match you can win, you win. If you can be up every second, you make sure you're up. You win every possible situation you can win. So over at 141, they've got Tegan Jamison. I've seen him wrestle, and Tegan Jamison is your guy that's going to put up points. He's going to put up points. And you're going to need guys like that are going to get bonus points when you're at the NCAAs because you want to take down that Cael Sanderson. You want to make sure that Cael Sanderson, the Sanderson dynasty, doesn't get another title, at least not in this year. And I think the Cowboys are line yourself up with that. You get your first 3 guys to perform very well. I think you're going to be very well. The notable talk is this 149 Carter Young. Carter Young puts up a lot of big points. I saw his match against Aiden Geyer of Oregon State. I believe the score was 14-4. A beautiful match, beautiful way to wrestle, beautiful way to go through the match. It's definitely one of those matches that I look at and I say, this is something you can learn from. Whenever a guy wins 14-4, that's always a match you can learn from because he's doing something right. It goes across, like I said, winning every second of the match that you can, and that's how you're wrestling a match right when you're winning every second. If you can go up 1-0, stay up 1-0, but don't just sit and be comfortable at 1-0. Take that 1-0 to 3-0. Take the score you get and try to always keep scoring. Never enough when it comes to wrestling to score. And over at 157, they've got Teagan Travis. Teagan Travis, at one point was the number 8 in the country. And I do believe that he can do, when he does his best wrestling, I believe he can All-American. I believe that is going to be one of those things where, he may be, I'm not going to say he's not the weakest link of the Cowboys team. I think he's a solid link of the Cowboys team, but I think that's one of those ones there where you got to say, well, wait a minute. If he doesn't do his best wrestling at NCAAs, I don't see him getting within the top 5, and I can always be wrong, but I do still see him being an All-American if he gets his best wrestling. And what's interesting is they were able to get Cameron Amin at 165, who was transferred from Michigan, and that is a good pickup. That's the one thing I'm talking about. We talked about early on the podcast when we started about the coaching change. The Oklahoma State Cowboys, John Smith retired, and he handed the reins over to David Taylor. But David Taylor came in, and he brings in Thomas Gilman. He brings in some other coaches that are part of his crew. He brings in his crew, and I think that with him bringing Thomas Gilman on there and having himself, and then having Dalton, or having Fix. I excuse me for mispronouncing the first name, but having Fix still on the RTC side, and then Roman Bravo Young also transferring RTCs to be over there. I think you have a good enough team and backing, almost where RBY, Roman Bravo Young, and Fix, they're not NCAA wrestlers anymore, but they can still roll around with those guys. Those are guys that they probably can get a good scrapping with, some good scrambling around, because both those guys know how to scramble, and if you see any RBY matches or even Fix's match, you understand that he has some good scrambling, and even RBY is definitely up there for a scramble guy. If there were guys that I say you can learn from, RBY is definitely a great guy to learn from with it when it comes to scrambling. One of his notable matches, he faced Sammy Alvarez when Sammy was at Rutgers. And it was a Big Ten tournament match, and Sammy ends up losing, but Roman Bravo Young had just and the amount of, when you saw the way he scrambles, it was like something that was like flourishing like very well, to the point where that's a good way to learn. Like, he's a great guy to learn off of scrambling from, because you look at the way he moves, it's just like instant. It's very instant that the second, like, you're in, it's the second. He doesn't have to, it looks like almost he doesn't even have to think. It's like boom, he's already in on another leg or grabbing another leg, and is already amidst the scramble. And most I would say most scrambles you can very well, they always teach, to get height. Almost, if you're higher than your opponent, there's a possible way you can win a scramble. But when you go up against guys like Roman Bravo Young that are great scramblers, it's a chance. The height may help, but every situation is always different. You don't know off of what's what. We can only speak to what happens if someone's got an outside single and they're scrambling, or a high crotch. It's always, we can speak to certain different stuff. And with that being said, we're going to move up to 174. They've got Dean Hamady Jr. coming from Wisconsin. So I know most of you have probably been watching NCAA wrestling, have seen this stuff, so you all know how it's going at that point. But Dean Hamady, I believe, very well can All-American. A lot of these guys on the Oklahoma State Cowboys are people that I potentially think can be All-Americans and are already All-American. So that's one thing that's really strong about this Cowboy team, is that a lot of them are already All-Americans, and some of them can All-American. And I don't say some of them. I believe, to my best of my ability and to what my knowledge is of wrestling, I believe, that whole team can All-American. I believe every last one of them can All-American. And what they have at 184, their 184 is Dustin Plott. It's needless to say, Dustin Plott, great wrestler. One of those guys that definitely could be up there. I believe Dustin Plott, for the way he wrestles, that's a national title in my book. That's a guy that I'm gonna say that if this is the Oklahoma State Cowboys, I say he's probably gonna be a finalist. I believe he could finish either 1-2, and if not 1-2, I believe he'll finish 3 at NCAA's. And their 97 is Luke Stolber. Luke Stolber is really a good wrestler. The match I saw of him, it wasn't a high score. It was just a low scoring match. But just because a match is low scoring, it doesn't mean you can't learn from it. A lot to learn in some low scoring matches, because that means that there's a lot of good defense going on. And some of those matches, when you see a guy win a match 5-0 or 6-0 or 7-0, it doesn't mean that, it was only takedowns, or it was only this or that. It means that there was a lot of good defense going on, that he was more than definitely taking over that match and showing that it's his match. A lot of coaches will always tell you, wrestle your match. And when you see a guy win 5-0, or a guy win 14-0, or a guy get a quick fall, that means that he made that his match. He controlled the match. He made sure he was winning every second of that match. And at heavyweight, they got Wyatt Henderson, who comes over from Air Force, and that's where I think, they've got that All-American group. I think they've got the best group to knock off that Cael Sanderson dynasty, because when you look at Cael Sanderson, it's year after year he gets the NCAA team title. Not every year, but it's year after year. He gets the team title. It's only, I believe, two, at my best belief at this short time, is he's only ever not gotten the title 2 years out of that I've seen NCAAs. I know the year that Ohio State won and the year that Iowa took the title what Iowa's title was around those COVID years. But when you look at that Logan Stevero Ohio State group, that was a group that wanted to get it done. You could tell that every last one of them wanted to be able to take a team title. And when you see a team like that, that's a team that's going to be very dangerous. And that's how I look at this Ohio. That's how I look at these Oklahoma State Cowboys. Excuse me. And that's the way I look at this, because these Cowboys look determined. And when you look at like Cameron Amin, and you look at Dean Hamady Jr. and Wyatt Henderson and Dustin Plott, you look at those guys are potential finalists right there. I think if Dean Hamady has a good tournament run, he could be a finalist. Cameron Amin more than likely is a guy that always gets up to the semis. I think that he's another guy that could very well be a finalist. And a few of those guys have been finalists before. And that's why I'm saying some of these guys are going to be able to, if they could do their best wrestling at NCAAs, they're going to be more than ready to go ahead and take another title. And that's where we're getting into kind of this area where it's talking about wrestling your best tournament, performance-wise, wrestling your best tournament, And I say that because there are some wrestlers that they're bad tournament wrestlers. Some are better tournament wrestlers. You got to really look at like the Oklahoma State Cowboys. The Oklahoma State Cowboys are 7-0 dual team right now. They're 7-0 across for the season. And you look at when they went to the Las Vegas Invitational, they took the team title. You look at they did some best wrestling. And, a lot of times what will happen is, I noticed this when I was in college and when I watched a lot of wrestling. Not if I go to an event, but when I watch some of the wrestling, I kind of notice it. When a teammate goes down, this is one thing when a teammate doesn't not get injured, but when a teammate loses, it doesn't fall on the next person to wrestle to say, oh, I have to, go out there and show that this is, it falls on the next wrestler to win for themselves. If it's a tournament where they're taking team score, like when a lot of tournaments do, there's always a team title, and Division I wrestling, D3 wrestling, D2 wrestling, and a lot of levels of college wrestling. But there's some tournaments you go to where it's going to be you and your team's going to be there. And when you see a teammate lose, it's always like, oh, wow, my teammate lost. I don't want to be another one to lose. The one thing I always went through when I was in high school, I always had, and college too, I always had the rule, it doesn't matter what somebody's rank is or who they are. Because if you wrestle your best match, it comes sometimes anybody is always beatable. Everybody in some way, shape, or form can be beat. An undefeated wrestler will always say, well, you can't be beat. You look at Nicholas Suriano and Anthony Ashnall. They left high school. They're New Jersey natives. They were undefeated through their 4 years of high school. But when they got to college, they were beat. And that's the difference between everybody's beatable. Nobody can ever be undefeated forever. What you can, there will always be that great talent that'll come and grace the mat and be better. But there are some things that you look at where you say, everybody's comes a time when you can be beat. And when you stay sharp and smart, light, fast on your game, that doesn't always mean you can be beat. But it comes across where teammate loses and you feel, oh, wow, teammate goes down. It's got to be the mentality of whether your teammate loses or not, it doesn't matter. Even if you're going to do a match and you have to face, it could be a state qualifier, somebody who placed at Fargo that you feel is better, or somebody, it doesn't matter if they're better than you. It doesn't matter what club they go to. It doesn't matter what school they wrestle for. What matters is the time it has to finish that match, the time that it's going to take for you to finish your match, for you to wrestle. That's the thing that's going to take the time. That's all that's really going to matter on this match, is the time it's going to take for you to finish your match. That's all that's going to really matter, is the time it's going to take for you to finish the match you're wrestling. And that's the thing where it's like you have to focus on the time it's going to take for you. Don't worry about, okay, this person is a state qualifier. This person is fourth in the country, or that person has done this before. That person has done that before. It doesn't matter about what this person or that person has done. It doesn't matter, because all that matters is the match you're going to wrestle, the match you're going to do, and the match you're going to very well win. And that's what I feel. is that was the one thing that I went across, was always about, hey, I'm going to wrestle my match. I don't care what he's ranked. I don't care how many times he placed. I don't care how many times he made it. I don't care how many times he has gone to Fargo. I don't care how many times he has gone to pop and flow duels, or when I was in high school, you had pop and flow duels, or how many times he went to flow nationals, or how many times he was Super 32. What I cared about was the 6 minutes that I had to finish that match. And my goal was always to win every match. And one thing I would always challenge myself in the room, it never was a drill, but I always challenged myself. I used to call it for myself 30 seconds to finish. 30 seconds to finish did not mean 30 seconds to finish literally, but what it meant is whenever a coach would go, I'd look at the clock, and whether I'm up, down, or not, I'm on bottom, I would look at the clock, and if there was a minute on the clock, I would say to myself, I have 30 seconds to get up, and my second 30 seconds is to score. And that's why I always called it 30 seconds to finish, because that's what I call the 30 seconds to finishing a match. I always looked at in the last 30 seconds, it was to finish a takedown. I always looked at not running from the guy, not going, around the mat. I'm up by one, not trying to make sure he didn't score. I called it 30 seconds to finish for myself. And I would always do that from time to time. That was the first thing I used to do. I used to always look at what was going on in my matches. And when I saw a minute, even in practice, I used to practice it all the time. When I saw 1 minute on the clock, I knew I had 30 seconds to get up. And if I didn't get up in the 30 seconds, that means in my second 30 seconds, I only had so much time. I would have to, in my second 30 seconds, I told myself I got to get up and I gotta get out from bottom, and now I have to score. And that's why I called it 30 seconds to finish. 30 seconds to finish was one thing that I used on myself. It never really was a drill in any of the rooms I was in, but for the fans of the weigh-in and possibly some of the coaches that watch, you probably already do something similar to this, but the weigh-in's going to coin the phrase 30 seconds to finish. I would encourage that, teaching that, it'll help for if a wrestler's down by 1 point and you got a minute left, they're going to rely back to that 30 seconds to finish and say, I got 30 seconds to get out and another 30 seconds to score. And it really is going to help with wrestlers that don't, I believe it would help with wrestlers that don't shoot a lot. Giving them only 30 seconds to shoot may help them get off their attacks and their takedowns a lot quicker. So the weigh-in's going to, I guess, a lot of times on these episodes, we start up something, and I guess that's the weigh-in startup on this week's Takedown Thursdays. We're going to come up with, a nice little drill, I guess we would say. A nice little drill. Some coaches may already do it. It may be a thing already out there, but we're just going to say the weigh-in's going to talk about 30 seconds to finish. And that could be used at the end of any period. If you're in the first period, you got taken down. Hey, the minute left in the end of the first period, you're going to get out from bottom, then take your next 30 by scoring. And now you finish that period on top. And that means you've got a score late that now your opponent cannot say, well, I can get out and get one at least from this. And, everybody knows, and takedowns are easier said than done. But when you really finish, it's taking that 30 seconds to finish. That's why it's called 30 seconds to finish, because you're taking that last 30 is to finish. It's to get a takedown. And that first 30 is to get out. And the last 30 is to get that takedown. And that's one thing that you talk about. For wrestlers that, I had the same problem when I was in high school. I used to always, have matches where I figured I couldn't go at my pace. I was always trying to be at the other guy's pace. And what I learned is when I moved my feet a lot and I didn't really stand in front of the guy and I moved a lot of those wrestlers that, had done good accolades and had been better wrestlers than me, I learned I beat them because I moved my feet a lot. And when you move your feet, and being able to really move your feet doesn't give the guy a chance to really set himself, or girl doesn't get a chance to set themselves. And when they can't set themselves in a wrestling match, they're uncomfortable. And when they're uncomfortable in their wrestling game, that means you have an advantage here because you can set your stuff up. So when they try to get comfortable, you've now already set up a shot. So at this point, you've scored, and now they're still trying to figure out where that, their next move. And that's the whole thing that I used to always do when I wrestled. The one thing I used to do always when I wrestled was take down. I got to know what's my next move. And the one thing I used to always do, I used to always go do takedown, chop. I used to go right down to the chop, and my goal with the chop was to go right into a tilt, quick points, going into a tilt, getting my guy already on his shoulders, already back to the point where now he's like, what just happened? I got a takedown and I got my tilt. And then one of the first things I used to do, I'll share with you, what I used to do. When I came and I was on top and the guy used to take bottom, first thing I would do is I would chop him one way, I'd switch over, I'd chop him the other way. So now he doesn't know what's going on. Then when I would come back the other way, I would always almost hit that Blair bar. I would almost run that bar. And that was one of the things that I used to run a lot. A lot of people, when I was wrestling, they looked at me and for a big move guy, I used to hit spladles and stuff like that. But when it came time to hitting a Blair bar, that was the one thing that I could hit quick. That was something that I had gotten down to the point where when the whistle blew, the Blair was already in. I remember in high school, I was in a match, and I ran a Blair bar. And right off the whistle, I ran the Blair bar. Beep, Blair bar. It was like whistle blew, and the Blair bar was hit. And I remember the kid came up to me after the match and said, you ran that Blair bar so fast. I didn't even get a chance to make my first move. And that's because you got to always be the first move. You got to know what you're doing and what you're going to do. And that's why I talk about, knowing your first move. When you go and you have to do a takedown, or you have to do a takedown, you need to score. You have to do, you need 1 point, you need 2 points. When you know what you have to do, it's about taking what you have to do and gaining those points and saying, takedown, now I've turned him. Now I've turned him quick. It's like takedown and now I've got this mover. If you're going to let him up, letting him up, but thinking I'm letting him up and putting him in a cradle. It's always knowing what you're going to do, because if you know what you're going to do, your opponent, when you're letting them up or you're getting your takedown, they're just trying to get to themselves. You just took them down. They're not thinking, oh, wait, something's coming. They're going to know something's coming. They're going to say, well, he's going to try and turn me, obviously. But if they just got taken down, their first instinct is, okay, I got to get myself out. I got to get my 1 point. But if you've already got him into a turn, now his mindset is going to be to fight off his back. And he's going to say, I got to fight off my back. And when you let him off his back, if you're running a tilt, know the next turn. I used to always do that. I used to run one tilt, cross body tilt, and then I used to literally feed it through the high crotch and run another tilt. So as soon as one was done, I used to run another. And I know now in wrestling, you have to let go of the wrist. That's the one thing they talk about, is if you run a tilt, they want to see you fully let go of your grasp and run another one. But knowing that you're going to run that second tilt and get those points helps you know that, okay, I let you go. Hey, I got my points, run it again. You see this in a lot of high-level ranked wrestlers, like in even the NCAA, high-level high school wrestlers. They go move to move. It's like you hit one tilt, you let them go, you hit another one. The transition into another turn, almost, is what we're going to say here. And that's a good thing to wrestling, is transitioning into those turns, because that's the best thing you can do, is transition your turns. Because when you transition your turns the way you're supposed to, that's a way to score points very fast and very quick. It'll lead you to either getting your pin or getting a tech. And that's a good way to go about wrestling matches, is just getting, if you know points are on the table, for instance, if you know you can turn the guy, unless you specifically are in a dual meet where you need 6, you need a certain number of points for your team to win that dual meet. So as we were saying, I'm going to get back to, what we were going across. Sorry we had to make it cut, had to stop and do something really fast, but we're going to get at where it's kind of almost, here on the way, and we're not athlete performance. We're not, in no way, shape, or form do we consider ourselves athlete professionals, but we're just speaking from some of the stuff we see in our perspective. I speak from my perspective. We're not athlete performance. We're not anything like that. But I speak a lot to my perspective. So that's one of the things that I most of the time would say. I'm speaking to my perspective. Excuse me there. My perspective. Because that's just what I know, the knowledge of when I wrestled, into kind of how I almost see NCAA shaping now. It's in that way where it's almost, there's a lot to learn, That was the one thing I used to do. When I played football in high school for about 2 years. When I played football, one of the things I did was I looked at film of Richard Sherman for about. I spent maybe 2 days. I'd go at home and watch a different clip, a different clip. I watched the way Richard Sherman would act in his coverages, the way he would move, some of the things he would do that were similar to being in those types of coverages. And it helped me along the way. I did the same thing with wrestling. A lot of people might not know. I've never explained the story on the way, and a lot of people who knew me always knew I was a spladle guy. I actually learned the spladle not from coaches. I actually learned the spladle from YouTube. I saw on YouTube, it was a video of a guy showing a spladle. He said, this will really help you get an edge when they put their head down, you turn the spladle like this. And it was one thing that he said you do to your opponents when they shoot a shot and they keep their head down. And if the head isn't down, you can't get the spladle kind of thing. And I learned it from YouTube. And when I learned it from YouTube, I continued to hit the spladle many's of times. Many's of times I would attempt it, try it. It wasn't till I learned it in middle school from YouTube. It wasn't until probably about my junior year of high school where I finally, hit a spladle in match, got a pin from it. But I learned it. I tried it. I would use it in certain practices. I went to a club called Apex Wrestling Club where I was, almost indefinitely using the spladle as many times as I could during practices. I believe I also went to a club named Brawl House. I believe I hit a couple times while I was over there too. I was just acclimating it enough to kind of get used to it. My sophomore year, I hit it in a match in a summer tournament, but I didn't finish with it. Didn't have it tight enough to finish with it. But finally, my junior year, I was able to finally hit that spladle. And that was one thing that I learned from YouTube. I learned it straight from YouTube. And learning the spladle was one of the things I was able to learn. Now, don't take it the wrong way. I'm not telling you that, YouTube can teach you more than coaches, because that would sure not be true. But by watching a match, you can learn certain things that you might not be able to do. Like me, the best thing I learned is when I learned a lot of my moves, there was some things that I learned from just watching certain type of sports. Like I remember I used to watch Bellator MMA. Bellator MMA, wrestling and MMA, they kind of go together, but not really, because it's a combat sport. So you need wrestling to do MMA, but not everything you learn from MMA can help you, wrestling wise. But one of the things that I saw a guy run a really nice power half. I saw him run a nice power half. And when he ran the power half, I remember him running the power half, and I went in and I ran a power half during a match myself. I said, I'm going to run a power half. And when I ran that power half, I remember my coach in middle school said to me, where did you learn that? I said, I learned it in an MMA match. And he said to me the same thing I'm saying to you guys. He said, well, don't try everything you learned from an MMA match. Might not all be so much as illegal to moves in wrestling. And I said, yeah. He said, but that power half, nice power half. I did end up winning that match by more than, I believe it was like a 14-0 match. It happened a long time ago, so I could be wrong on the score, but I remember I won the match. It was one of those matches I never forgot, because it was like, all right, I tried to move something new, and it ended up working out. Almost similar to a lot of times when I learned new moves, I always wanted to try them, because, you can't say something doesn't work for you unless you try it. And that was the one thing that I always went by, was always, you got to try this stuff. You got to always try everything you can in a match. You got to always try most of the stuff you can, so that you can almost understand, this doesn't work for me, that works for me. You can try it in practice, but unless you try it in a match and you see it didn't work out, are you really trying it? But for me, that's just my opinion. I always tried everything in a match. I tried it in practice too, but in a match, if you're going a live go in practice, well, I also tried it there too. But if I liked it through the live go, I almost had a 3-step process. I learned it, I practiced it, I would try it in a live go, and then if it works through the live go, then the last place I would try it was in the match. And then if in the match it didn't work well, I'd say, well, maybe it didn't work that match, but is that for me or is it not for me? That was one of the things that I used to kind of try through my way of wrestling, and that was one of the things that I picked up on, is being able to really watch a match. Some people say that it doesn't help you when you watch your opponent wrestle a match before, but it does. It does, because it gives you that unexpected. For some wrestlers, it's like, oh, he's good or she's good. Wow, that's a good wrestler, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Everybody's always one pin away from winning a match, and I always say that because, with the way scrambling goes, you can always almost end up with a pin, or you can always almost end up with something going your way, or even the opponent's way, but the best way to go about it is, looking at your opponent, you can learn from it. If you're going to look at your opponent and you're going to say, wow, look at that high crotch, look at the way they're shooting that, look at their top game. But if you're going to look at your opponent and say, hey, wow, he's good or she's good, wow, I'm going to have to bring it, that you're already physically and mentally, you're already counting yourself out of that match. And you don't want to count yourself out. If you're saying somebody's good, well, you got to think about it this way. You're better. Always think you can be better. Always look at somebody not for who they are or how many medals they have, for you have a match in front of you, and all you got to do is line up and do your game, do your stuff, work your match. It's your match. It's not their match. It's your match. And when you run your match, you beat people. I noticed there were people that when I was JV, I wrestled a few guys who were on varsity over a summer, guys that were varsity the previous year before. And when I beat them, I said to myself, why? Why did I win these matches versus other matches? Because I lined up and I wrestled my match. I got my shots in. I got my takedowns in. I made sure I got my turns. I had a solid top game. Having a solid top game can really change the demeanor of a match. You ride a person out for a whole period, they are now going to look and say, wow, I just got ridden out. I just missed the chance to get 1 point. And now you have a chance. Mentally, they're going to almost say, wow, I've got to bring it. They're going to try to almost throw that kitchen sink because they're saying, wow, I just got ridden out. Now I want to ride them out. And when you get out, now it's that point where they're going to say to themselves, wow, they've gotten out. Now I'm down. I'm not doing the same things I should be doing. And that's where, I had a mentality where that's why I never cared what somebody was ranked. I never cared if they were 12-0, 14-0. I never cared if they were 2-0. I always cared about, I had a match, and my match is to win. My match is to wrestle this kid. Like, there were a few matches that I went in and I said, I want to hit a spladle. And, those were the matches that I learned that those are not the best way to wrestle matches. And I learned that those were matches that I didn't win because I was more worried about, I want to hit this spladle. And, the way I hit my spladles is, off of the opponent's shot. And that's what got me, that I learned. I learned early in the season, don't do that. I was starting the year off 0-1 because I wanted to hit the spladle my junior year. And I knew that was not a good way to go. So after I said, no more about the spladle, no more about that spladle business, just wrestle. And when I started just wrestling, I learned that it naturally got hit. And it wasn't something that I was worried about. It was like, okay, me and a guy are in a good scramble. We're going. And I see, all right, I can't get him off. He's tough on my legs. I see him put his head down, and I went for a spladle. And I said, wow, I got it that way. I got it without thinking about it. Not something that I was like, I have to hit this. I thought to myself, I don't have to hit it. But that's where I say you talk that way about, certain things with wrestling and performance wise. And that's just what I'm going to bring to you guys, the fans of the weigh-in, for Takedown Thursdays. We're keeping it. I know these episodes aren't the full 40 minutes, but we're keeping it kind of almost short, right now as I'm coming into doing a lot of these episodes. But like I said to you guys, the fans, I'm showing you guys that I'm going to put these episodes out there for you. I'm going to get them done. We're going to get it done. And, and when my partner joins us again, we will get back to the regular scheduled program of the weigh-in with both the co-hosts on here getting it done. But for right now, I'm running the show. Thank you for watching, and this is The Weigh In by Ben Chestnut and Sebastian Romero.